Joining us now from the location of the Trump rally in Colorado Springs is One America's Washington correspondent Jack Posobiec. So, Jack, obviously you weren't in the courtroom today, judging by where you are right now, but we did get an idea of what that scene was like in the courtroom today. We heard different things coming from the judge. We heard different things coming from the stands as well. What was the environment like there?
Well, Alex, I was actually in the courtroom for the entire trial of Roger Stone, which led up to the sentencing hearing today. And I got to tell you, this is a judge that from the start has had clearly very negative opinion of Roger. She's someone who, throughout the trial, slapped a gag order on him because she was worried about things that could potentially happen if Roger spoke out or was posting on social media. And so issuing these vague orders and preventing Roger from publicly appearing here on One America News and in other media and social media to defend himself, to assert his rights, taking those away from him, then not allowing him to communicate with members of his inner circle, members of people who could be considered, as she put it, potential witnesses. He was also gagged on. So this is someone who from the start has sort of had that take on Roger, and you saw that in full force today. She called Roger someone who is very insecure, someone who is constantly seeking attention. She claimed that Roger lied in order to cover up for President Trump, bringing President Trump and the Russia investigation into this, when in fact that those were not actually even the charges. Roger was not charged with lying to cover up for Trump. He was charged with talking about a source on WikiLeaks. It had anything to do with Donald Trump directly. So the way that this case was politicized from the start really came to a head today, and the judge really spoke to that, I think.
And that gag order that you mentioned right now, too, that was actually still in effect after his sentencing today. I mean, he came out of the courtroom today, couldn't talk about his sentencing, couldn't talk about the aftermath of really what he thought about the trial. And keep in mind, this is a man, to your point, too, that has been forced to be silent for the past several months now. So we still haven't really heard too much about Roger Stone, but a lot of the critics of this case, too, would also point to the way that this entire trial was handled, dating all the way back to the jury selection. I mean, we've heard about one of the jurors who may have been biased against Stone. It may have been more than one juror, some reports suggest. So what comes next for Roger Stone? Is there a possible appeal, or is this kind of the final say-all?
Well, one of the big things that we're waiting to see come forward, I broke the news earlier this week that a book that's coming out on the Roger Stone trial by Milo Yiannopoulos is going to have some leaked documents in it. He's promising leaked documents specifically pertaining to the courtroom process. And so we know that a lot of this court, and I can say this just from being there, took place under seal. So there's probably a good chunk of this, maybe 30 to 40% of the proceedings that we don't even know, or that we weren't privy to, even for those of us that ventured into the courtroom and sat throughout the trial. And so a lot of that information that's starting to come to light as members of the jury have outed themselves, and people are going back and looking and said, well, wait a minute, you said that you had no bias, no opinion on the case, yet here are tons of social media posts of you, not only prior to the case talking about Roger Stone, but making anti-Trump posts while serving as the jury foreman of the trial. This is obviously a case of saying one thing in court and doing one thing at home, which is, funny enough, this is actually essentially the same thing that Roger Stone was accused of.
And regarding that point, too, lawyers for Stone say that they brought that to the judge's attention, that Judge Amy Berman Jackson was made aware of some of these possible conflicts, and that she necessarily didn't think that it would influence the outcome of the jury. So that is one of the reasons, too, why a lot of critics of this case say that an appeal may be coming. However, that might not even be worth the debate if President Trump were to pardon or commute Stone's sentence. Do we have any inference so far? We've heard the president talk about that a little bit in the past, but is there any other inference as if that's may be the route that he's going to go?
Well, the president spoke today, not too long after the sentence came down. He spoke at length about his relationship with Roger, the fact they've known each other for 30 plus years, that he's very close with Roger's family, actually attended their wedding. And he said that, yes, of course, Roger is a character. He's a little bit different, but that he's a very smart guy and someone who's very involved in politics and was always a strong supporter. So the president saying those words, one of the words that we've been hearing throughout D.C. this week, and certainly coming from the White House legal team, is the word commutation. They're not interested or not necessarily thinking it might be the best idea to do a full pardon, issue a full pardon prior to the election, which of course we are right in the middle of. but a commutation, which would then come out of the White House, which it means the conviction would stand, but Roger would not actually start serving that 3.5-year sentence. And they pointed to the fact that George W. Bush, in fact, conducted the same exact kind of situation when one of his aides, Scooter Libby, was convicted of lying to Congress. President Bush commuted the sentence, and actually President Trump later on came in and delivered a full pardon in that case.
Yeah, and I mean, this is one of those things, too, where as it moves on, a lot of people have said that if Roger Stone ever sees a day in prison, it could give credence to the whole type of Russia investigation that, of course, found no collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia, but it would give critics of the president something to once again point to and say that there was something there. We've heard Tucker Carlson make that point. We've heard other type of conservatives kind of make that point. So it'll be interesting to see how the White House responds to it. But Jack Posobiec, you've been all over this case since the beginning. I appreciate you coming on tonight and sharing your expertise with us. Thank you.